Well, speaking of this other perspective that I am highlighting of that does appear to contradict our ordinary perspective, I want to talk a little bit about identity, and you could say the process of identifying any phenomena, not just self-identity, which is where a lot of the focus is in spirituality and contemplative practices, self-identification. But the identification of anything turns out to be not actually possible, which again doesn't negate identifying things. Yeah, I know that sounds crazy. Could sound crazy. So just as you're sitting here, one of the more obvious things when you just notice, give a little attention to what's here, a little intentionality to your experience, is that if I were to ask you to characterize something about your experience right now, say something about it. In other words, characterize it. Like, what's happening right now? And you say, well, I'm experiencing, and fill in the blank, whatever that is that you've identified that you're experiencing, a thought, a feeling, a sensation, and then the label that you might give that thought, feeling, or sensation. I just want you to notice right now, in this instant, how radically impermanent, discontinuous reality is. The moment that's here right now, if we even try to put it in any kind of bounded, the moment as is encased in some sort of beginning and end, which is impossible to do. But if we say this moment, this instant, feel in a very simple, natural way what's here, feel the way in which it's no longer here. In the moment of experiencing it, it is vanishing. Notice that. I mean, that quickly it's gone. It's almost as if from this vantage, it's like everything is in the past, like there is no present moment, because it's just not here for any duration. For it to be experienced as having any duration, there's this curious thing that consciousness can do, which is sort of stretch it out, make it seem like it has continuity over what we might call time. But experientially, that is not. It's like be with the moment, like pinpoint now. Not what was, not what might be, but this instant. Just this, it's just a pinpoint of an instant, isn't it? How long does this pinpoint actually last? It's very, very strange because there's this sense of constancy in the sense that something's always here, something's always here, something's always here. But it's here for no time. And so because of that, it's literally impossible to know what it is. Because what we're experiencing in each moment has not been before. It's, I mean, I have to refer to something abstract. I have to refer to memory. Memory's a mystery, but to call my current experience, let's say I'm feeling tired. Okay, I've just described some phenomena, but what I've described, as I'm describing it, is vanished. It's already vanished. Okay, so now there's something else here. And I could say, oh, well, it's still tired. In other words, it has some kind of continuity, endurance. It endures the experience, which is how I can, it's like stretched out over time, right? Hence, it's a thing that I can identify. There it is. It has continuity to it, right? But does it? Does it have continuity? Or has what consciousness has described as something like fatigue or tiredness is gone, and then it's taken whatever it was, however it appeared, is now appearing differently, and then that's appearing differently, then that's appearing differently, then that's appearing differently. So the defining part of the mind like goes, this is what it is, and it labels it, and then it's already vanished and turned into something else. You see? So that's the fantasy of identification, the fantasy of naming, the fantasy of being able to know and characterize what's appearing, because what's appearing is disappearing in the moment of its appearance. So things are not here long enough to grasp hold of them and really pin them down, you see, and identify them. It seems that we can identify things. That's how we can talk about things. Like I'm drinking a glass of water, right? But that's a concept. That whole thing is a concept, because the actual experience is always happening right now. Every single part of it, from touching the glass, bringing it to my mouth, taking a sip, all of it's happening in the flash instant of the moment. And that just does not translate into descriptions that hold up under scrutiny, because again, the whole thing is an appearing and a disappearing and an appearing and a disappearing. How can we grasp hold of that? And that, now here's what it is. I've just put it in a frame of reference. It's just far, far too evanescent, too slippery, too shape-shifting. So experientially, we've talked about this many times, but it bears repeating, I think, that if you think you're in a familiar place that you know, and you have knowledge of where you are, that is a fantasy. We literally don't know where we are or what this is without referring to memory. And it's fine. And that's part of what reality does, is it creates this sense of continuity out of discontinuity somehow. It's part of its magic. This whole inability to identify things and know what they are, owing to their dynamic nature, right? Because whatever we've identified now has become a new identity, right? Even if that identity is here for no time. It's just, right, it's like, if you imagine something that's in a process of opening, like imagine that the transformation of the moment, clearly the moment's transforming, but the way consciousness is at one level making sense of it is transformation, hold still, then another transformation, hold still, right? Where there's sort of stoppage of the transformation long enough so that we can identify, go, there it is, boom, I see the pattern. But the patterns are dynamic, if there even are patterns to what's being perceived. There really aren't, because it's so dynamic that to see something as a pattern, it's like the pattern of stars, in constellations like the Big Dipper. It looks like it's holding still long enough that we can name it as an observable pattern. But if you investigate your experience in the ways that I suggest people do, you'll see that you're just met head on. You have this collision with dynamism, this collision with impermanence. And so what appear as stable patterns are actually unstable and patternless at their basis. They don't hold up. So again, if you imagine, like, you've seen those time-lapse photographs of flowers like blooming, right? It's just this endless opening, isn't it? So if you were to say, okay, so our definitions of what the moment is, in other words, our characterizations of what's here, here's the pattern. Now I've labeled the pattern as whatever we're calling it experientially. Those are definitions, including the pattern of what we think of as us, ourself. Because of its dynamic, alive nature, it's not going open and then, there's the pattern. And then, then it changes a little more and then it takes on a new form. And then it changes a little more and no, it's a constant opening. Feel the way in which the moment is just constantly, it's like a constant opening. Feel that. It's not holding still. Well, how can you know what it is? How can you pin it down? How can you have to like seem to stop it and then label it, but it won't be stopped. It just keeps opening. Identification is not possible. Nothing has any identity from that perspective. It's just in a state of, you could say, if it's in any state, it's in a state of constant vanishing. Amazing. But you see, it doesn't negate, this would seem to negate, why do we even see any things that we call forms? We shouldn't be able to, in a sense, if they have no duration. How does the world appear formed if it's fundamentally formless, unformed, right? The unborn, as they say in the Zen Buddhist tradition. Well, that's its magic trick. It looks like form, doesn't it? It looks like phenomena that we can label and name. And it's fine to label and name phenomena. But it's liberating to see that the names don't hold up, that they're very, very rough approximations of something that, in fact, is, if I try to define, I happen to be seeing Ed because he was the last one who was speaking, and I have him in the speaker mode. So I see him, larger than the other boxes on Zoom. If I try to define who Ed is or anyone else on the call, it's just going to be a very, very rough approximation, because whatever Ed is as a being, as a life form, is just like a flower, just constantly, it's not holding still. I mean, our aging process is a good example of this, right? We're just in a state of constant transformation. So the idea of being able to define what we are is, so in a sense, this opens up the possibility of any and all interpretations. I mean, that's kind of what's going on, this constant interpreting of what can't be interpreted. But seeing that it can't fundamentally be interpreted awakens something in us to realize that, wow, all those interpretations are just potentially informative, potentially useful, potentially ways of conveying information back and forth to one another about things. But do you see how this is, I mean, we've been on the call for a half an hour, and you could talk about having been on a call for a half an hour, but experientially, it's like, where is everything that you've experienced in the last 30 minutes? It's gone up in a puff, right? It's not here. What's here is this. It's amazing. It's just, that's what's here, is this instant. There's no past. And in terms of the pragmatic implications of this, well, it's very liberating, right? Because our ordinary ideas of being someone either at the mercy of this vast life that's potentially, a danger to us and overwhelming to us, or we feel confused by it or stuck in it, or our experiences, it's like none of that is actually going on when you see the dynamism. There's nothing being stuck in anything if there aren't any things, is there? There's just this wide open, ungraspable, you could say, dance of I don't know what it's a dance of. There's no way, obviously, to put it into words, as I've been saying the entire time. And this radical, indescribable, non-identifiable reality looks like all of this. It looks patterned. It doesn't look like nothing. It looks like something, doesn't it? That's its curious. How come it doesn't just look like pure abstraction, pure insubstantiality? It doesn't, it looks patterned, it looks formed, it looks, and incredibly intricately formed, right? And complexly organized. And so that's, again, it's sort of curious, paradoxical nature. We look like forms that are identifiable. I can recognize, there I see James, I recognize him, but actually I have to refer to the past to recognize James. In this moment, what's being seen has never been seen before. Maybe you've heard me say these kinds of words like many times before, but you've never heard them before. Not like this. Maybe you felt similarly to how you're feeling right now, but no, you haven't. You've never felt anything like this, because everything is fresh, everything is new. Amazing, huh?